Welcome to SR Studios Inside the Issue. Today's guest is Sarah Angileri, whose story Owning a Dog is featured in the fall 2024 issue of Southern Indiana Review. Sarah is originally from Michigan, but she is now based out of New York, where she's completing her MFA at Sarah Lawrence College. Before starting her career as a writer, Sarah worked in kitchens as a cook, instructor, and personal chef. She now writes for food and beverage brands and has been published online at Tasting Table and Modern Farmer. Owning a Dog is her first fiction publication. Sarah, welcome to Inside the Issue.
Great to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Would you mind starting off by reading your story? It's a flash piece, so if you could just read the whole thing for us, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Thank you.
Okay, so the piece is Owning a Dog. My new lover is moving in to a new home, and I have promised to help him unpack. We will keep the boxes, he says, but only the banker's boxes. He shows me how to unfold these delicately like paper cranes. I have hands here made for moving, but I wait patiently for his green lights. I hate waiting. Now. I want to stash his things somewhere only I can find them. I adjust his armchair. He readjusts it. This lover is grateful I am helping still. He kisses me on the cheek. He grazes my waist with the tips of his fingers. He holds his hands out for me to grab, ushering me toward his new bedroom. The walls are a violent shade of turquoise. You could paint those, I say, but he brushes this off. First, let's unpack. I hate every single utensil he owns. Cheap plastic, the edges of the spatula melted and blunt. I'm certain his knives will not be sharp either, so I grab one to slash through a box, spitefully. He doesn't say anything about dulling the blade until I do it again, this time with the knife for filleting a fish. I am meeting him here for the first time. He is a closet, deconstructed. There he is, as shoes stacked across several boxes, and him again as jackets hanging loose and free. He is a box of snowboard boots on the ground and dress shoes still wrapped in tissue, and cufflinks in a small black box. Is this for me? I joke. Get on your knees. He laughs. Later, I excuse myself to read on his couch, my work unpacking done. I've set the kitchen straight and consolidated the crumpled newsprint into one single bag for recycling, but still, I feel I am missing something. I walk past his office and find him staring listlessly at his homeless, unpacked things. All the space on the walls he will have to shade in with adulthood. As I lie back down on the couch, through the out-of-focus bits behind my book, I remember what I have forgotten. With my mind, I ask him to come toward me, and he does. Now he is trying to burrow inside me the way a small animal would search for its next home, kicking up dirt in kisses, making room for himself in the safer hollows of my body, the length of my neck, the divot of my collarbone, my inner ear. I don't know how to make love. I mostly just fuck. Once I did make love, I think, or perhaps undid love because we cried the whole way through, our faces honest for the first time. But today I will do it. Give in, make love. I put my finger in his mouth. Suck it, go ahead. First, we are adults, and now we are babies. Once, a man I was seeing was surprised when I fed him my fingers. I caressed the crease of his lips as if to say, let me in, but he bit the tip and spit out the rest. Well, that was new, he said. But him, he takes my finger in his mouth and nurses it as if for nourishment. And how could I not fall in love? You worked so hard today. You deserve a reward, he says. I do deserve a reward because I didn't say a thing about the cereal bowls with the scratch marks left from the tines of a fork or the blender from 1981, the two sets of an old roommate's cutlery. He unbuttons the tops of my pants and I shimmy them past my hips, past my stretch marks. He strokes these like they're tattoos from God, admiring the artist's work. His hands find me, but just barely. For once, I am not worried he will grow too tired to see if I come or not, which I do, effortlessly. Then he stops and presses his palm into me gently to stop the shaking like he's blotting a wound. Afterwards, we get dressed. I make us tea. His faucet, where the hot is the cold and the cold is the hot, sputters. The chandelier in the kitchen is made out of plastic. He thinks it's crystal, but he doesn't mind that I'm using the lid to the saucepan to keep the mug from cooling, and I don't care that he wears special glasses that aren't even prescription when he watches TV. I think we're making memories here, he tells me, and for the first time, I could see myself owning a dog.
Right. Thank you. That's great.
Yeah.
I really like how we get these. There's a few things I like. I like that he's never named. There's something important, I think, that he's not named.
Yeah.
Um, and I think just for me, it's the particular details throughout that really ground me and draw me to this story because the scenario is a relatively simple, straightforward scenario, but it's the details that this narrator is drawn to and notices that really do something for me. And I think too, the last line, I could see for the first time I could see myself owning a dog. I love the ambiguity of that line because um it's clearly she's not saying I could see myself owning a dog with him. Uh, I mean, and what I like is that we might read it that way, or we also might read it some other way. And I think that it's this, I don't know, after this very intimate moment between the two of them, she has this realization that may or may not include him, which I think is I really like that touch at the end of the story. So uh,
Thank you.
so where did this story what was the genesis of this story and then what we can talk about your process and how you crafted it, but I'm curious where this story came from.
Yeah. I mean, this was happening during a period of my life where I was dating quite regularly. And so it's sort of an amalgam of different people that I was dating at the time, and experiences that I had had moving both friends and this particular lover into his home. Um, and I really wanted to play with this idea of withholding intimacy, and then also these moments of connection too, and how we can have a very critical eye towards someone, and then we have this little flicker of intimacy, and all of a sudden, they're kind of our whole world, or are making us feel that we could see ourselves, connecting more deeply in partnership with someone, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that person. So it's really about expanding our capacity for love.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, it's well said about particularly the to me, I guess it speaks to some of these details too that don't seem like they don't seem to be compatible. I
Yeah.
mean, not they're not incompatible, but the things that the narrator is noticing that he doesn't seem to notice says a lot. And I think that I don't know, that strikes me as authentic. Um,
Right.
so what was your process like for this story? The crafting it, I guess. Yeah.
Right. I mean, I always start with, I kind of try to start with a feeling. So a particular feeling that I've either experienced within the context of this particular story, or if I'm trying to take a feeling that I've had and kind of tie it to another experience that I've had. But I try to start with a feeling. And so the feeling for this story, I think, was that moment of um, sitting on the couch with this person. And it was really the last line. It was really the last line that I was writing towards, which is I could see myself owning a dog, or I could see myself settling down with someone. Um, and so I took that last line and then kind of built towards it. And I always just free write. I just let myself kind of spill onto the page. That's something I've had to get really comfortable with, because I think seeing your own word vomit is very uncomfortable at first.
Yeah.
But it's really the only, I have to trust that I can craft and shape it in the revision process into something that's going to be beautiful. But really just focusing on, okay, what little details are coming to me in this moment. Saying yes to everything is really a part of my process. No matter what it is, no matter how bizarre. I trust my unconscious is trying to direct me in towards a story that my conscious mind wouldn't otherwise come up with.
Yeah, that's really good. I talk to my students about kind of reframing, and we're talking about undergrads here, about reframing, like as fiction writers, as fiction writers, poets, essayists, whatever, creative writers, like we get to revise, right?
Right.
we don't have to, like you do in your other classes where you feel like you have to revise because it's an assignment or something. It's like, no, it's a privilege. We get to revise.
Mhm.
And it allows us to then, everybody's process is different, but if you're a process like what you mentioned, where it's about just getting it out there and trusting
Mhm.
that you're going to do more work on the back end,
Right.
works, that everybody's different, but that's something that I think is a hurdle for some beginning writers to realize, like, no, okay, I no one has to see that first thing. That's messy.
No.
And um yeah. So did you see this as, I mean, you know, was it always short to you in your mind, or did it become that?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's a great question. I think when I wrote this, I wasn't writing as much as I have been since I wrote this, which has probably been, oh my gosh, maybe two years at this point, or a year and a half. And so it's just much more comfortable with the shorter form because it felt more contained, but it also just felt like a moment, a snapshot. It didn't feel like it needed to be a longer story. And I'm trying to listen to when a story is telling me it wants to be longer, shorter. I'm working on a short story right now, actually, that I think wants to be a novel, but for the sake of finishing something, I'm just going to write it as a short story. But yeah, I really do think that a piece has its own like energy and life force to it, and it wants to be what it wants to become. And you kind of have to, your job is to just sort of like step back and let it be what it's trying to become, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I've said this before, but I'm terrible at, I think what I'm writing is going to be short and it's not, or I think like, no, this is going to be long and it's not. So I think it is about, the story is going to be what it needs to be, one way or the other. And
Yeah.
there's, I think Richard Bausch said something. I don't know if I read this or heard him say it at a conference once, something about like, um, I thought I was writing a novel and it turned out it was a story. And he had
Right.
360 pages of a manuscript that turned out to be, 18 or something. And that seems like, oh my God, but it's like, no, if that's what that story needed, that's what the story needed.
Right.
And another, and Antonia Nelson, a fantastic short story writer, I heard her say one time that, and she's written novels too, but she says everything she sits down to write is a story until it's not.
That's a great
So,
point. Yeah, just start
um,
with a baseline of
she assumes everything's going to be a story until she writes, and she's like, nope, this actually isn't a story. This is, and she's probably only written two or three novels and maybe four collections. So, but
right.
still, it's, she's sitting down thinking in story, and I think that's kind of an interesting way to think about it. I think for story writers anyway, particularly.
Right.
Um, did this story pose any like particular challenges to you?
Well, actually, you sort of named the first challenge, which was that I didn't name the other character, the lover. I didn't
Mhm.
realize he's just the lover. And I guess the one challenge that I came across at the very beginning, oh, you know what? I edited it out. I was trying to compare this lover to another lover, but because I hadn't named either of those characters and they're both lovers, it got very confusing. So I ended up just paring the story back. And I think throughout the revision process, I mean, this was longer when I had originally written it. It's probably twice as long. So, so yeah, I guess I did whittle it down into flash length. It's probably 1,400 words before. Um, and I do like that letting go process because you realize how much um, other sentences in the piece are serving the piece, and you don't. There's extraneous material that you don't actually need, and you can just cut it down.
Yeah, and I think that not naming him, and I think like generally speaking, and I'm thinking here more of as like a writing teacher. I'm pushing students to name their characters because most often they think they're being clever and coy by not naming them, and it's usually not.
Yeah,
But this is a moment where it's the right choice because for one thing, it's new, right? The first line tells us it's new,
right.
and um, you know, with the thematic resonance of that last line, thinking about settling down, you know, he's somewhat anonymous until he won't be, perhaps, right? And I don't know. I
Right.
think it just seems like this is a situation where not naming him, if it was like Jeff, we're like, okay, the story still works, but there's something about making him anonymous that works to its favor. And I guess I'm saying anonymous is not true because we get these really particular details about his life that
Right.
tell us way more about him than a name ever could.
Yeah, he like hasn't hasn't earned a name yet in her
Yeah,
story.
yeah. Poor Jeff, right? He's still um yeah. So I guess with like revision, then you said you pared this story back. What is, and I guess you alluded to this already in saying that when you write, kind of let go in that early draft, and you then know
Mhm.
you have to revise significantly probably, but um, maybe more like practically, what does that look like for you when it comes to
Mm,
that process of revision?
mm. Well, so I write the first draft. I really try not to edit at all as I'm writing the first draft. And then I like to give myself some time to come back to it with fresh eyes. I think that's really important. It helps if you're working on other pieces at the same time, because I think when you're working on those other pieces, you're learning things and then you go back to the original piece. And then, anytime you're introducing more detail to the story, it's furthering the story, and it might be furthering the story into a direction you don't want to take it in. But I guess in a more practical sense, I was actually working with a writing coach at the time. So I had someone that helped me to edit this.
Mhm.
And so that was very helpful. And I thought that I had it at a good place when I submitted the story. And then um, your team edited it back down to like maybe cut out 400 words. And I was really appreciative of that because I realized, oh, the parts that were cut out really weren't serving the overarching narrative. They weren't serving the story that I was really trying to tell.
Trying to remember, I can't even remember what that, it was some, what I'm trying to remember what the edit suggestion was. It was
I
cutting
think
something, did it start sooner? I
Um,
can't remember. I should have looked.
oh, well, I did introduce this third character, which was this other lover that she had been with. And she had lived with that character before. And so she was kind of flashing back.
Okay.
And so that was cut out. Maybe I even cut that out before I sent it to you because it was confusing. Um, and then there was this other part about them both having allergies. And
That's right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he has like a nut allergy and she feeds him this muffin. And it kind of took it in this direction of like, is she trying to hurt him?
Yeah.
She's not trying to hurt him. So again, it's these details that are distracting from the meat of the story. So I was okay with those being taken out.
Yeah, I mean, and that's a good lesson, I think, for all of us too, in that, everything needs to be, I mean, we don't need our stories to be, um, you know, where like a billiard ball type where one thing bumps into and it creates
Right.
this like chain. But, you know, I think broadly speaking, we all want our details to be pulling the story or funneling the story in the direction we want it to go.
Right.
Sometimes we don't know what that is until we figure out what the story's doing. And then it's about going back and, looking at those details and saying like, okay, those are great, but that is not, it's no longer funneling readers where I want them to go.
And there's
Um,
like a gut feeling too of knowing whether or not it's headed in the direction that your like intuition wants it to head in. And you kind of have to listen to that.
yeah. And hopefully I mean, I guess that to me that comes from when I talk to students about this kind of thing, that comes from reading, right? Where we
Right.
develop our intuitions come from absorbing, thousands of stories and,
Right.
we're drawing on that knowledge, you know, that our instincts are developed from that experience.
Right.
Um,
Right.
yeah, no, that's so like on even on longer work, is the process the same for you, basically?
Um, yes, it's pretty much the same. I think the fundamental rule that I try to live by is not editing as I'm writing and just saying yes to everything. And as someone who is a perfectionist, that's my nature. It is so hard for me to do that, but that is where I churn out my richest work. And then once I get it out of my brain and I see it on the page, then I actually can visually see, oh, this one line is actually what I want the story to be about. And then I can start writing more towards that. But yeah, I have a very heavy revision process. My first drafts, I would never want anybody to look at. They're like not even grammatically correct.
Okay, so I'm guessing then that stories pretty radically change then from
Yeah.
conception to draft or like actual. Okay, all right, yeah, I wish I could work that way. I think I used to work more that way, and I'm like I write terribly slow now, and I don't know if it's a
Mm,
product of age or what. I don't hate it, but I remember what's weird is I can't remember. Like I wrote a very terrible novel in my MFA that will never see the light of day, and that's okay. And I wrote it like in a semester, and I have like no
oh,
memory
wow.
of doing that. And like I have no memory of like physically doing it.
Right.
And I'm like, man, that I had to have been just foot to the floor, forward momentum. And I mean, the novel reads that way, of course, but I don't know. There's something I wish I could go back to that a little bit to really
Mm.
power through something, and then clean up the mess later. But that's not my process anymore, unfortunately.
Well, I
Uh,
do think once the more skilled you become, then you kind of know, okay, this what I'm writing right now, this isn't what I'm trying to say, and I can get rid of it. And I'm just not quite there yet. I'm like really in more of a yes, everything is important until it's not mode.
yeah, I think that's probably a really healthy way to be. So you're not self-censoring, so you're not afraid for a story to go someplace that may not end up being, like I think we're so afraid. So many writers, maybe me included, are so afraid of like wasting the time. And it's like, well, if you were writing it, it isn't a waste, right?
No,
If it takes you 10 pages to find the one page you need, then it wasn't a waste.
I totally agree.
Uh,
Yeah.
what kind of books have been important to you? Books or writers have been important to you in your development as a writer?
Yeah, I have a whole stack actually that I pulled. One of the books that I read fairly recently, within the last 2 years, is Chronology of Water by Lydia Yuknevich. Have you
Okay,
read this before?
I have not. I know of the writer. Yeah.
So she's really known for it's a memoir. And she's known for writing from the body, but she is very vivid and very visceral in her descriptions of the body, and she doesn't shy away from anything. And to get back to this idea of self-censoring, I think when we're writing about an experience that is, emotional and personal, we tend to kind of seize up and want to write around it. And so she's really encouraged me to write into the heat of that experience, even if it feels kind of like, oof, to put it on the page, because if you're feeling it, your readers are going to be feeling it as well. They're going to resonate with that experience. And I think it's our job as writers to be as truthful as possible.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how often we lie to ourselves. I think this is another part of why I try to just say yes to everything that's coming to me, is because in the revision process, I see how much I lie to myself. Oh, no, I wasn't actually feeling that way. I'm protecting this character that I'm writing about. So yeah, so that one, I really love female writers that are writing about mental health challenges or just the experience of being female. Sheila Heti is one of them. Her book on it's called Motherhood, is her working out this central question of whether or not she wants to have a child as an artist. It's auto fiction, but I think it is largely memoir. And then I would say I'm growing up, I was very into Haruki Murakami, and I haven't read his work in a while, but I was introduced recently to Yoko Ogawa. You familiar with her?
I know that. I know of the writer. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So the diving pool, and I guess I bring that up because they're both writing about the mundane in like a very surrealist way. And that's something that I try to bring to my own work. And I think actually kind of comes through in this short story, which is like viewing everything almost with a childlike sense of innocence. So everything is imbued with this magical quality. I don't think a story needs to be dramatic, to have drama embedded in it. And I think they both, Murakami and Ogawa, do a really great job of just taking the everyday and imbuing it with magic. So,
Oh, cool. That's great. And
yeah.
you're right. I mean, this story, I think if you look close at it and with this in mind, there are moments that are not odd, but
Yeah.
like, and not odd, not magical. I mean, nothing is implausible here, but they're just moments that seem just, slightly off kilter, right?
Right.
Um, And there is the line too, first we were adults and now we are babies. So that is a clue, I think, to what you're saying of how, sort of looking at the world this way. Uh,
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
well, and I mean, even him thinking the chandelier is crystals when it's really plastic. That's a naive, oh, it's pretty, right? When it's not.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you can tell these characters are young in the story for sure.
So in addition, and you can sort of say you've already answered this question, but in addition to the books that you just mentioned, are there any writers we should be reading other than the ones you've mentioned?
Margot Stein's, um, her book Brutalities. If you're interested in writing that is coming from the body and that is somewhat hard to stomach, she's a brilliant memoirist. And yeah, so I'd recommend Margot Stein's. Um, Emma Klein is wonderful as well. Her book, The Guest, I'd highly recommend, especially for newer writers, because she's just very precise in the way that she's setting up scenes, and her economy of language is pretty amazing. There's no word that's wasted in the piece, and it's just a very clear story. So that's actually a book that I come back to often from a craft perspective. I have a tendency to write longer sentences, and I'm trying to kind of pare my writing down a little bit. So
I've read The Guest and I thought it was great. I haven't read The
yeah.
Girls. And she also had the story collection too. I can't remember what it was called. I've read the story collection and The Guest, but I didn't read The Girls was the her first book, I believe. Uh, yeah, she's good.
Right.
So if you don't mind, what are you working on now?
Yeah. I'm working on a novel, and I thought it was going to be a memoir, but I'm giving myself more liberty to fictionalize certain elements. And in allowing myself to do that, I think the truth of the story is coming through more.
Hmm.
And it actually started as the idea was much larger than what it's now become. So I think I'm going to turn it into like a trilogy, maybe. We'll see. I want to just get through the first part. But I share that because I think oftentimes we can have one idea and it can be a full novel. We might think we need to add a ton of detail to it, or not even detail, add a lot of events to it to make it into something worthy of being a novel. But oftentimes it can be, a period of someone's life, a character's life that is quite bracketed, and there's enough there for it to be a full novel. So I'm working on that and a couple short stories. Yeah.
Good. That's not, I mean, it's funny, but it makes perfect sense that, you're turning to fiction to tell the truth in a way that you can't in
Right.
nonfiction. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
it's a hard thing to wrap your mind around, but it's so true that the you know the that fiction can get at truth in ways sometimes that nonfiction can't.
And our memories are, I mean, if I'm trying to recall a certain moment, I can't remember every detail. Our unconscious mind is filling in the gaps with fiction anyway. So,
Yeah, I'm teaching creative nonfiction next semester, and that's one of the things we talk about is just that it's you know probably shouldn't even worry about it, right?
right,
That you're trying to tell, the truth, your truth as you know it and remember it. And that's the best you can do. Unless we're getting into like literary journalism where you're doing the research and stuff. But if it's memoir and
right.
personal essay, it's like, well, you only need to be faithful to your memory. And we know our memories are faulty. So, to me that to me that's makes it fun.
Yeah,
That you don't have to, that it's those spaces that we don't remember or we know we're likely misremembering that are really fascinating, I think. So
yeah.
um all right, well, great. Thank you so much for joining me
Thank
this
you.
morning. You can find Owning a Dog in the fall issue of SIR, and you can go to usi.edu/SIR to find out how to get a copy. And the link will also be in the description below. And thank you again, Sarah, for joining. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Casey. This is great.
All right, well, we'll see everybody in the next one. Thanks.
Take care.